My daughter's father vanished for 2 years and then demanded custody rights, blaming me for not tracking him down. So I gave him a chance to show up. I met Matt when I was 19. He never wanted to put a label on it no matter how many times I asked if we were exclusive. That went on for almost 2 years. Right around the time I turned 21, he told me he was joining the Air Force in honor of his father, who had passed a few years earlier. He promised he'd stay in touch. He didn't. A few weeks after he left, I found out I was pregnant. Once I heard the heartbeat at my first appointment, I knew I was keeping her. I named her Jade, because Matt and I had never told anyone we were together. I didn't name him as the father to anyone, including my own parents. I told people I didn't know. It cost me friendships, but I raised Jade with my parents, and the handful of friends who stuck around. She was about to turn 2. Last month I ran into Matt at the store. He looked right at her, then at me, and I could see him doing the math in his head. He followed us to the checkout asking whose daughter she was, and then all the way to my car. 2 days later, he showed up at my parents' house saying he had a right to know if Jade was his. I told him she was. He said I should have told him the moment I found out. I reminded him he never gave me a way to reach him and never once checked in like he promised. He said that wasn't fair. He was serving his country. I told him plenty of service members call their families. He said his situation was different because of everything he was dealing with after his father died. I told him I was dealing with plenty too, alone, while pregnant with his child. He said he wanted to be in Jade's life starting now. I told him I needed time to think about what that would look like. He said there was nothing to think about. He was her father, and that meant something. His mother called the next day. Patty couldn't believe I'd kept her granddaughter a secret for 2 years. I told her Matt never gave me any way to reach him and never asked. She said I should have found a way. That's what mothers do. She said the past didn't matter. What mattered was Jade having her father going forward. I agreed to supervised visits twice a week at my parents' house. He showed up almost an hour late to the first one and said traffic was bad. He came to the second and spent most of it on his phone while Jade played by herself in the next room. When I brought it up, he said he was settling back into civilian life and things were an adjustment. He said I was being too hard on him considering everything he'd been through. The third visit, he canceled an hour beforehand. Patty called right after and said I needed to be more flexible since he was trying his best. She said I was setting him up to fail by expecting too much too soon. I told her I wasn't expecting anything unusual, just that he show up when he said he would. The next few weeks went the same way. Confirm, then show up late or distracted or cancel with a fresh excuse. He'd call afterward asking why I seemed frustrated, saying he was trying his hardest and I wasn't giving him credit for effort. Patty kept calling too, asking if I could add more visits so Jade could bond with her father faster. I told her the visits we had weren't being used well, so more wouldn't fix anything. Around then, Matt started telling people in his family that I was making things difficult for no reason. My cousin Maeve asked me why I was being so hard on him when he was clearly trying. I explained the missed visits, the excuses, the pattern. She said maybe he needed more patience since he was still adjusting. I told her I wasn't expecting perfect. I was expecting him to show up when he said he would. She had no answer for that. I spent 2 days after that replaying everything. Not because I doubted myself, but because I was tired of being the only one keeping score. Matt had confirmed 6 visits. He'd been on time for 1. He'd been present for 0, so I made a decision. Jade's second birthday was 3 weeks out. I called him that evening and kept my voice calm, even friendly, because I wanted him to hear it as a gift, not a test. I told him her birthday was coming and it would be a great chance to do something special for her. It would show everyone, me, his mom, my family, that he was serious. He could plan the whole thing. Pick the spot, get the food, order the cake. I'd bring Jade and be there. He didn't hesitate. His voice got big and loud like he'd been waiting for exactly this. This is what I've been asking for. You'll see. I'm going to make it perfect for her. I almost believed him. Almost. But I'd been watching Matt long enough to know the difference between wanting to do something and doing it. After we hung up, I typed out a text because I wanted everything in writing. Party on Saturday at 1. He picks the location. He handles food and cake. I bring Jade. Then I screenshot it and saved it to a folder on my phone. I know how that sounds, but when you've spent 2 years being the only person who shows up for your kid, you learn to keep proof. He sent back a thumbs up, then a second message. Got it handled. That went in the folder too. An hour later, Patty called and I could hear the smile in her voice before she finished her first sentence. Finally, you're letting him step up. I knew if you gave him room, he'd show you who he really is. I almost laughed. I just said something polite. I didn't tell her what I was actually thinking, which was that she was right. I was giving him the room, and he was about to show everyone exactly who he really was. That's what I was counting on. A whole week went by. Not a text, not a call, no location, no theme, no cake flavor. On day 7, I asked how the planning was going. Almost 24 hours later, he wrote back. Still working out the details. Don't worry about it. My daughter's birthday was 2 weeks away, and the man in charge of it had no details but wanted me not to worry. I asked if he'd booked a place. His answer came fast, like he was annoyed I was still asking. I said don't worry about it. No venue, no confirmation of anything. I screenshot the thread and added it to the folder. I didn't push. If he wanted to treat his daughter's birthday like a mystery he was keeping from me, fine. I'd let the silence do its job. A couple days later, I picked Jade up from my parents after work. Ember had her at the counter feeding her little pieces of banana. My mom wiped her hands on a towel and gave me the face she makes when she's trying not to say something and is going to say it anyway. So, what does Matt have planned? I told her the truth. I had no idea. She frowned, not surprised, worried. You're trusting him with this? For Jade's birthday? I could hear what she wasn't saying. The late visits, the canceled ones, the phone glued to his hand while Jade played alone in the other room. I looked at her and said, that's the whole point, Mom. Either he does it or he doesn't, and everyone will see which one it is. She held my eyes a long moment. I could tell she wanted to argue. Instead, she nodded slowly, like she was choosing to trust me even though every instinct she had said to take over and plan it herself. I told her I had it under control, and I did. Not because I trusted Matt. I'd stopped trusting Matt a long time ago, but because the backup was already in my head. My parents' backyard, Jade's favorite foods, a cake from the bakery down the street. If he came through, Jade gets a party from her dad. If he didn't, Jade still gets one from the people who'd always been there. Either way, my daughter was going to have a good birthday. 10 days out, still no detail. No location, no time, no menu. Patty hadn't called in a week. I wondered if she was was starting to worry too. 5 days out, I sent one more text. Just need the address so I know where to bring Jade. A question any person planning a party should be able to answer in 3 seconds. Nothing that morning, nothing that afternoon. Around dinner, he wrote back. I told you I got it. Stop checking up on me. I stared at it, like I was the problem for wanting to know where my daughter's birthday was going to be. I typed carefully. Matt, the party is Saturday. I need to know where we're going. The read receipt popped up almost instantly. He saw it, then nothing. No dots. No reply. I set the phone face down and stood at the sink, breathing slow. There's a difference between knowing something will happen and watching it happen in real time. I screenshot the thread and saved it with everything else. The next day, I was at my parents' again, watching Jade chase a ball across the backyard, falling every few steps and getting right back up like nothing happened. Banks came up beside me with that quiet look he gets when he's been thinking about something and finally decided to say it. I know what you're doing, and I get it, but if that man doesn't come through, Jade's the one who pays for it. I told him the backup was ready. Food figured out, cake ordered, the yard could be set up in under an hour. He looked at me and I saw something that was pride mixed with sadness. Good, because I've seen enough of his type to know how this ends. I kept my eyes on Jade. That's why I need everyone else to see it too. He squeezed my shoulder once and went back inside. 3 days out, Patty called, and something was different the second I heard her voice. She wasn't loud and sure of herself. She sounded careful, almost nervous. So, Matt's been really busy with the new job, she started, and I already knew where this was going. I was thinking maybe I could help him. Maybe we could have it at my house. I let the offer sit, because I knew whatever I said would get repeated to Matt. Patty, he told me he had it handled. If he needs help, he can ask me himself. There was a long pause. Then quietly, I just don't want Jade to miss out, and for a second I felt for her. Underneath all the phone calls telling me I wasn't being fair, she was a grandmother who wanted her granddaughter to have a good birthday. But if I let her take over, Matt would never have to face what he'd done. He'd walk into a party his mother planned and act like he'd had it under control the whole time, and nothing would change. So I said, neither do I. She didn't push. She just said, okay. After we hung up, I sat thinking about how her voice had sounded. Less sure her son was going to pull this off. She was starting to see it. She just wasn't ready to say it out loud. 2 days out, still nothing. I was on the living room floor watching Jade stack blocks into towers and knock them down, clapping after each one fell like she was congratulating herself, and a knot formed in my chest. Not because I was surprised, because I realized some small, stupid, hopeful part of me that I thought I'd killed off a long time ago had still been waiting for him to prove me wrong. I didn't want to be right about this. I wanted Jade to have a father who showed up and cared enough to plan one afternoon for her. Sitting there on the floor, I let that go. I sent one last text. Matt, I need the address by tonight or I'm making other plans for Jade's birthday. Hours went by. Jade went to bed. I wiped down the counters. At 11, my phone buzzed. Relax. I'll send it tomorrow. Relax. I didn't respond. I put my phone on the charger and lay in the dark, listening to her breathe through the monitor. And I let the last shred of hope have one more night, just in case. The night before the party, I was getting Jade ready for bed when my phone buzzed on the dresser. I didn't look. I laid her down, pulled the blanket to her chest, and stood there until her breathing went slow and steady. Then I picked up the phone. 9 o'clock. Matt. Hey, something came up with the venue. Can we push it to next weekend? I read it 3 times. You can't have something come up with a venue you never booked. Standing there in the dark of her room, I felt calmer than I had in weeks, because it was over. The waiting, the hoping, all of it. I didn't answer him. Not one word. I walked out, closed the door, and called my mom. She picked up on the second ring like she'd been waiting. We're doing the backup, I said. Backyard, 1 o'clock. Invite who you want. Short pause. Then Ember said, I already have the cake in the fridge. By 10 the next morning, the backyard was perfect. Streamers between the trees, balloons on the fence, plates shaped like butterflies, because Jade couldn't get enough of butterflies lately. I invited Maeve. I invited the friends who'd stayed. I texted Patty that she was welcome to come celebrate her granddaughter at 1. I didn't mention Matt. I didn't need to. If he showed, good. If he didn't, everyone would finally see it for themselves. No more explaining. The truth was, going to do all the talking. The party started at 1, and it was everything I wanted. Jade in a little yellow dress, running barefoot through the grass between everyone's legs, laughing so hard she kept losing her balance. Ember and Banks by the food table looking like the proudest grandparents on the planet. When it was time for cake, she looked at the slice for about 2 seconds before she shoved both fists straight into it, frosting everywhere. Cheeks, chin, yellow dress, all of it purple. She looked up at me with this huge smile and something clicked in my chest. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't carrying everything. An hour in, a car pulled up out front. My stomach went tight, but it was Patty coming around the side of the house with a gift bag, moving stiff like she wasn't sure she was supposed to be there. She knelt and kissed Jade on the forehead. Jade let her, but didn't reach for her the way she does with my mom. Patty stood and looked around at the decorations, the table, the cake, then at me. Where's Matt? I kept my voice even. I don't know, Patty. He was supposed to be the one planning this. Her face tightened. Not angry, not sad, just tight, like she was holding something in and didn't know what to do with it. She nodded once, slow, and sat down in a lawn chair by the fence. 2 hours in, the party was winding down. Matt was nowhere. No text, no call, no car. Maeve came over while I was stacking cups and said it quietly, like she didn't want anyone else to hear. He's not coming, is he? I kept stacking until I had to hold the stack steady with my hand. Then I looked at her. I stopped expecting him to a long time ago. There was no questioning in her eyes now. I'm sorry I questioned you. I didn't know it was this bad. I nodded. Now you do. People started saying goodbye. I was walking a friend to the side gate when a car pulled into the driveway. Engine cut. Door opened and shut. I turned and Matt was coming up the driveway carrying a thin plastic gas station bag with a cheap stuffed animal poking out the top. Jeans, wrinkled shirt, and a look on his face like he was strolling into a party he'd thrown himself. He came through the gate, glanced at the leftover streamers and the half-cleared table and the people mid-goodbye, and spread his arms wide. Hey, birthday girl. He spotted Jade near the back door, still on my dad's hip, and walked over and reached for her. Jade looked at his face, at his hands coming toward her, and she pulled back. She turned away from him and reached for me. And and when I stepped in, she grabbed my leg with both hands and pressed her face into my thigh. She didn't know him. He'd been in her life for a handful of visits, missed half, spent the other half on his phone. She had no idea who this man was. She held on to me like I was the only safe thing in the yard. The whole backyard went quiet. Not the normal quiet where people are just done talking, the heavy kind, where everyone is looking at the same thing and nobody knows what to say. Matt stood there with his arm still half out and the gas station bag hanging from his hand, and he looked around. My friends staring, Maeve staring, Patty in her lawn chair with her purse in her lap, staring at the ground, Banks by the door with his arms crossed. The smile came off his face like it had never been real. He turned to me. Why is everyone looking at me like that? And I could hear the edge in it, the tone he gets when he knows something's wrong and wants it to be someone else's fault before anyone can say so out loud. I picked Jade up and she buried her face in my neck. I didn't raise my voice. Everyone was already listening. You were supposed to plan this party, Matt. You didn't. You didn't book a place. You didn't get a cake. You tried to cancel last night, and you showed up 2 hours late with a gas station toy. He blinked. His jaw moved like he was chewing on something. I told you something came up with the venue. He said it like 7 words erased 3 weeks of nothing. I held Jade tighter. Her small hand gripped my collar. And I told you she needed a father who shows up. You had every chance. This is what you did with it. He pulled me around the side of the house, out of sight, and his voice dropped low and hard. You set me up. You gave me this party thing knowing I'd mess it up so you could make me look bad in front of everyone. I stepped back. I gave you 3 weeks. You set yourself up. His jaw clenched. I have rights. You can't keep my daughter from me. I looked at him. Really looked. Wrinkled shirt, tight jaw, eyes darting like he was already rehearsing the version he'd tell people later. I kept my voice steady. No one is keeping her from you. You're keeping yourself from her. I have every text you sent, every canceled visit, every excuse, every timestamp. And my mother wrote down the minute you walked in the door for all 6 visits, because she's the one who watched Jade play alone in the next room while you sat on your phone. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not guilt, not shame, closer to panic. He stepped in and his voice came out rough like he was barely holding it together. You've been building a case against me this whole time, haven't you? And there it was, the thing he was actually afraid of. Not losing Jade, because you can't lose something you never held. He was afraid of the proof, of all those no-shows and empty promises sitting in a folder on my phone, lined up in order, telling a story he couldn't talk his way out of. I shifted Jade higher on my hip, her fingers curled into my shirt. I looked him right in the face. No, Matt, you've been building a case against yourself. I just didn't delete it. He stared at me. For a second I thought he'd say something mean, something loud, something designed to make me small the way he always tried when he ran out of excuses. He didn't. He stood there with his mouth in a hard line and his nostrils flaring, then turned and walked back around the corner into the yard. I followed a few steps behind. He went straight across the grass to Patty and said, "We're leaving." That was it. No explanation, no goodbye, no last look at Jade. She didn't move for a second. Then she stood slowly, the way people stand when they're not sure their legs will hold them, and she looked past him at me standing there with Jade on my hip and the streamers moving behind me in the breeze. For a moment something crossed her face, something soft, something that almost looked like understanding, and I thought maybe, finally, she was going to say something real. Then her mouth settled back into that tight line and she gripped her purse strap and said, "This didn't have to go this way." I stood there with my daughter's frosting sticky hand on my collar. "You're right, Patty. He could have just shown up." Her mouth opened. I could see the words forming. Whatever last thing would make it my fault instead of his. Nothing came out. She pressed her lips together and turned away and followed him around the side of the house. Car doors, one after the other, engine, tires backing out, gone. The yard felt bigger after that. One by one, everyone left, until it was just me and the streamers and the butterfly plates stacked in a pile. I sat down on the back step. Jade wiggled off my lap to chase a balloon that had come loose from the fence, dragging its ribbon across the grass. I watched her and felt everything I'd been holding all afternoon settle into my bones. Not sadness, not anger. Wait, the kind that comes from carrying something a long time and finally putting it down and realizing how tired your arms are. Banks came out and sat next to me, elbows on his knees, watching her chase it the same way I was. After a while he said, "Quiet, you handled that better than I would have." My throat went tight for a second and I swallowed it down. "I'm tired, Dad." And I meant it every way a person can mean that word. Tired of explaining myself, tired of defending my choices, tired of being the one who does everything and still gets treated like the problem. He nodded slow. "I know, but you're not wrong. And now everyone else knows it too." Later, after we cleaned up and I gave Jade a bath that turned the water purple, I put her down and sat on the couch in the quiet. My phone buzzed around 9. Maeve. She jumped in with no warm-up. "I owe you an apology. A real one. Not the halfway thing I said at the party. I just listened." "I believed him," she said, and there was a crack in her voice I wasn't expecting. "I believed him because it was easier than believing my own cousin was carrying all of this by herself. That's on me." I leaned my head back and thought about every time I'd tried to explain the pattern to her. The way Matt could make anyone believe he was trying just by saying the words in the right voice. How alone I'd felt when even my own cousin looked at me like I was the unfair one. "Thank you, Maeve." A pause. Then, "Whatever you need going forward, I'm here." And I believed her. Not the way I used to believe Matt when he said he'd show up. I believed her because she'd seen it with her own eyes. When we hung up, I sat in the dark listening to Jade breathe through the monitor, and I thought when I plugged it in that night. 61 screenshots. I didn't delete a single one.